This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good night, Shabbos. As we prepare for Shabbos Chanukah, Havaleinu L'Toiva, the Rambam tells us in Hilchos Chanukah, Mitzvahs Ner Chanukah, Mitzvah Chaviva Hi Ad Ma'od. The Mitzvah of Ner Chanukah is a very beloved mitzvah. Not just beloved, not just very beloved, Ad Ma'od. Very, very beloved. V'tzarch adam lehizoer ba. A person has to be careful. Kedei lohidia hanes, in order to publicize the miracle. U'lahaisif b'shevach hakel, and to increase and to add the praise of Ribbon Shalom. V'haidaya loy ala nisim sha'asalanu. The Rambam uses a very unusual expression that Ner Chanukah is mitzvah chaviva hi ad ma'od. It's very beloved. Now the Rambam is not a Musar Sefer; it's a work of halacha. And the Rambam certainly would not just give his personal opinion as to his affinity for the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah. The Rambam is saying halachically and objectively that of all the mitzvahs in the Torah, this is not a comment that the Rambam says, as far as I know, by any other mitzvah. What is therefore so beloved about Ner Chanukah? Certainly, Ner Chanukah is only midrabana. We have many mitzvahs d'oraisa, talis, tefillin, mezuzah, Torah. The Rambam doesn't say it's mitzvah chaviva. And even mitzvahs d'Rabbanon, the Rambam doesn't say about Megillas Esther or Netilas Yadayim, it's mitzvah chaviva. And therefore we have here on the sheet, many of the Mefarshim ask the question, but we have in the sheet from the Sefer Yerach L'Mayadim, the Chidushim of Rabbi Yerucham Olshin, and I was fortunate enough this week to speak to the author of Moshe Gruen, who was kind enough to give me of his time. So here, that's the question on the Rambam. Why does the Rambam classify Ner Chanukah as mitzvah chaviva? Now I want to draw your attention to a number of nuances of difference between the lashon of the Bimei Matisyahu, the Alanisim of Chanukah, and the Bimei Mordechai ve'Esther on Purim. Now, many of the differences we've discussed in the past. For example, on Wednesday we discussed Kehayoim Hazeh, and you got to hear that shir. And last year we discussed what it means. I want to draw your attention to something most fascinating, and that is, at the end of the Chanukah Lashon, it says, "V'yachar kain bo vanecha lebebesecha ufinu seichalecha v'tiras mikdashecha v'dliku neres v'chatzos kodshecha." The kavu shmainas yimei Chanukah elu, and they established these days of Chanukah lahodos alahala. Could somebody please tell me what these words are doing in the Alanisim? The Alanisim is supposed to be what? Thanking Hashem for the miracle. Why, in the course of thanking Hashem for the miracle, do we inject that they established the Yom Tov of Chanukah? How is the establishment that we establish Chanukah part of our thanks to Hashem for the miracle?
That's how we are thanking Hashem.
No, we're relating the story. We're trying to say, Hashem, thank you for doing this. Why in the middle of saying, thank you for doing this, that's like saying, Mr. Nathan, thank you for everything that you do, and I am thanking you for everything that you do. That's what I just said. I got it already. It's Chanukah. We're thanking Hashem. Why in the thanks are we saying, by the way, Hashem, we thank you and we establish Chanukah? Now, if you notice on Purim, we don't say that Haman wanted to kill us, and Hashem foiled his plot, and we hung him, and then we went and established Purim to eat and to drink.
Okay. Once I
was there, and I'm just conscious. On Chanukah, we conclude with the establishment of the Yom Tif. On Purim, we don't say, and after we killed Haman, we went along and we established the day of Purim to eat and to be happy. Because the establishment of the Yom Tif is not, you wouldn't think, is a part of our expression of thanks to Hashem. Why is it mentioned on Chanukah as part of the Alanisim that we established the Yom Tif of Chanukah? So these two questions are also mentioned in the Sefer Yerach L'Mayadim. I believe that these questions appear in Maimar Yud. If you look in an earlier Maimar Tes, there's another diuk that Rabbi Yerucham made in the Alanisim, And that is, the beginning of Al Anisim starts off that the Malchus Yavan Harasha, who they want to destroy? No? There are not many choices. The Italians, the Russians, the French? No. What does it say? What does it say?
The religion of the Jews.
What does it say? Which people? Al Amacha Yisrael, your nation Israel. Jewish people, the Yidden. At the end of the Al Anisim, it says, after Rebbe Shem made the miracle, V'achar kein ba'u v'necha. Why does it switch? Why doesn't it say V'achar kein ba'u Amcha Yisrael edver beisecha? What happened all of a sudden? In the beginning, they were coming against Amcha Yisrael. And then, sort of, at the establishment of the Yom Tif and the salvation, who was saved? Banecha. What is the Hadgasha? What is the emphasis on the fact that Klal Yisrael were Banim Lamak? Okay. Let's talk about another question. The Gemara in Yuma says, commenting on the Parak in Tehillim, Parak Chaf Beis, which talks about the salvation of Purim that we mentioned on Wednesday, right? Lam Natsech ala Yeles HaShachar Mizmor LeDavid, that Esther is compared to the morning star. And the Gemara says, just like the morning star is the end of the night, so too, what? Chanukah is the end, so too, Purim, Esther is the end of the miracles. Right? You got it? Why is Esther compared to the morning? Just like the morning is the end of the night, so too Esther is the end of the miracles. Ask the Gemara, Esther wasn't the last miracle. What was the last miracle? Chanukah! Says the Gemara, we're not talking about Chanukah. Chanukah was never recorded, it was never canonized. It was apocryphal, right? Chanukah was not canonized in the Tanakh. But Purim was written. Purim was the last written miracle. So we want to know, we discussed this Wednesday, why is Purim written and Chanukah was never written? Why could Purim be incorporated in the Tanakh and Chanukah is not incorporated in the Tanakh? Now, let's move on. We're all familiar that even though there's a Masechta Megillah, there is no such thing as Masechta Chanukah. And its halachos only appear randomly in Mishnayos in how many Masechtas? Only 6 Masechtas. And we have a list over here. Where are they? What are the 6 Masechtas? Masechta Bikurim, Parak Aleph, that until Chanukah you could bring Bikurim and you could be Kairei. And in Rosh Hashanah it says until in Kislev, in number 7. In Kislev, the Shluchim went out because of Chanukah. And in Masechta Tainus it says Ein Goizrin Tainus Alat Tzibur on Chanukah. And in Masechta Megillah it says we interrupt the regular Kriyas HaTorah, including Chanukah. In Moed Katan it talks about Avelos on Chanukah. And in Baba Kama it says if you leave the Ner Chanukah you're patur for damages. Why is it that in all the Mishnayos the dinim of Chanukah are only listed sort of agavorcha? No Mishnah says on Chanukah you need to be moisef v'heilich or poiches v'heilich. There's no Mishnah that tells you any of the laws of menorah. No Mishnah that tells you any of the laws of Chanukah. Every time Chanukah is mentioned, it's mentioned agavorcha. It's not. So it's so interesting that Chanukah was never recorded in the Torah. It's never recorded in the Tanakh. There's no Masechta on Chanukah. Even when it's listed in Mishnayos, it's only listed backhanded, agavorcha. Why are we avoiding Chanukah? Right, so people say different terutzim, which are very hard to understand and accept, and are probably not, right? Thank you.
Tanakh closed before Chanukah.
Yeah.
And Rebbe didn't want to evidently include Chanukah in the
That's the question, why? Why? It's a major...
Because of the Chashmain.
What was found?
They took over.
Most Rishonim say they didn't do anything wrong. That's why Rabbi Yehuda Nasi didn't include them. Okay. So Rabbi Say, I want to introduce you to a few very important ideas. Number 1, the Yevanim came into the Heichal and they made all the oil tamei. Could someone tell me how Yevanim made the oil tamei?
They opened the seal.
And since when opening a seal makes something tamei?
We touch it,
Goyim can't make anything tamei. There's halacha, only Bnei Yisrael can make tamei, Goyim can't make anything tamei. It's a fair Gemara. That's not tuma. And shemen is not yayin. Can someone does a Pashut halacha? In order to make something tamei, you have to be able to be kadosh. Do Goyim wash Negel Vaser in the morning? No. Do they go to the mikvah on Erev Yom Kippur? When you go to the mikvah Erev Yom Kippur, you see Joe next to you behind you? Say, hey, what are you doing here? He says, Erev Yom Kippur, I came to be Tovel Zayin before the Heilige Tag. No. Goyim don't go to the mikvah. Do you ever see Goyim go to the mikvah Erev Shabbos? No. Goyim, there's no Indian of Tumah by Goyim. Goyim can't become Tameh. So how do you Yavana make the oil Tameh? You ever wonder that? What does it mean, Timukah Ashmanim? So you say Tameh Mace. Goyim could render Tumas Mace. Yeah, but that kind of Tumah is Hutra B'tzibur.
Is what the tzibur?
If the majority of the tzibur is Tameh through Goyim, then that Tumah is waived, is dismissed.
Actually, you could have led, but they did a Hidu. It was a Hidu, not a led.
That's the kasha of the Pri Chadash. Goyim cannot be Metameh. So you say, yeah. But we know midrabanan, the Chachamim were Goyzer, that Goyim have a din of a Zav. It's one of the Yudches Dvarim that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel were Goyzer, that a Goy that touches something, he renders Tumah Zav. But wait a second. Does anybody know what came first, Chanukah or Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel? Chanukah came a good 100 years before Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel ever made the Gzer Drabanan of Tumah Zav. And therefore asked the Pri Chadash, how did the Yavanim, how are they metameh the oil? Goyim cannot make anything tameh. Look at number 8. We don't find Goyim while they're alive they can render tumah because uve perek b'nois kusim the Gemara in Avodah Zarah says Tanya daber al b'nei Yisrael v'yomarta aleim ish ki yazav b'nei Yisrael mitamin beziva ve'ein akum mitamin beziva. Goyim cannot offer to maziva. There's Gzer Drabana and that Goyim have a din of a zav. That Gzer happened more than 100 years after Chanukah. How do I know? This was one of the 18 things that the Talmidim of Sham and Hillel were Goyzer, and Shimon and Gamliel and Shimon were noyeg their nesias before the Churban 100 years, like we find in the first parak of Shabbos. And the Zman Nes of Chanukah, does anybody know when Chanukah happened? How many years before the Churban?
150.
Very good, 206 years before the Churban Bayis Sheni. How? Right? Like we say, the Malchus Chashmonaim was 103 years, and the Malchus of Hordis was 103 years. So Hordis reigned for 103 years, the last 103 years before Bayis Sheni, and 103 years before that the Chashmonaim began. So he's saying that the Chanukah happened 206 years before Churban Bayis Sheni. And the Chiyur Ches Dvarim was 100 years before Bayis Sheni. That means 106 years before the Tumah D'Rabbanan of Zav for Goyim was invented, the Yavanim were Matame all the oil. Well, how were they Matame all the oil? You ready for this? We always thought, the Yavanim were Matame all the oil, so we needed a miracle. Says a Pri Chadash, when the Gemara says that the Ziknei Beis Shammai and Ziknei Beis Hillel were Goyzer, that Goyim have a din of Zav, they were Goyzer that Goyim have a din of Zav even for Truma. But even before that, there existed a Gzer Drabanan that Goyim have a din of a Zav for Kachim. In other words, really, Goyim, the Isser Drabanan that Goyim are treated like a Zav, that existed all the way back in the times of Chanukah. But in the times of Chanukah, they were a Zav to make Kachim Tameh. And the Talmidei Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, they said Goyim have a din of a Zav even for Truma.
So the oil is not kosher?
What?
The oil is not kosher.
So the oil was kachim. It was hukdash. It was hukdash l'mikdash. It wasn't. It was hukdash, and therefore there was a gzera d'Rabbanan of Tumas. Or he says that you could say they were geyser originally for truma also, but they weren't geyser to burn the truma. And the Talmidei Beis Shammai Beis Hillel were geyser even for that you burn the truma. But bottom line is, if you want to know why the Yavanim, how they were matame the oil, what's the answer? Tuma d'Rabbanan of Tumas Zav. So you're going to come home for Shabbos, and everyone's going to say over the Torahs that the Yavanim were matame. You say, what Tuma? Tumas Meis, Tumas Zava, that was 100 years later. No, there was also a Gzeira D'Rabbanan. See, the whole miracle was necessary to preserve what? An Issa D'Rabbanan. Why did Hashem make the miracle of Chanukah? So we shouldn't have to violate an Issa D'Rabbanan.
Some sources say that he could have done it with Tumah B'tzibur.
But that doesn't. All right. But Tumah B'tzibur doesn't apply to Yisur D'Rabbanan. Only Yisur D'Oraisa. Says the Chassam Sofer. Listen to this. That the rabbis in the times of Chanukah, they weren't sure what to do. They said, you know what? Yeah, we said Goyim are like a Zav, but maybe in this situation we should waive our decree in order to allow Avodah in the Beis Hamikdash. Because if we're going to maintain Avodah, if we're going to maintain the Yisur D'Rabbanan, that Goyim have a din of a Zav, then we're not going to be able to do the Avodah in the Beis Hamikdash. The Chacham didn't know what to do. So Rabbi Shem showed them what to do. By making a miracle, the Rabbi Shem was showing them, don't you dare waive the Isser D'Rabbanan. I endorse the Isser D'Rabbanan. The miracle is a ringing endorsement to the Chachmei HaTorah. That was the whole purpose of miracle of Chanukah, is to show the Rabbanan that Hashem is pleased with the Isser D'Rabbanan. Because Hashem wasn't pleased, He wouldn't do the miracle. He would just say, Rabbanan, you should waive your Gezerah in this situation. No, Hashem said, I don't want you waving your Gezerah. The Gezerah Rabbanan, that's the backbone of Klal Yisrael. That's the Torah Sheba'al Peh. Don't tamper with it. I'm making a miracle as a haskama to the Dinei D'Rabbanan. The Chassam Sofer says this in two places. We'll look at number 9. We'll read it in what he says on Chidushim on Masechta Shabbos Chaf Aleph Amud Beis. Matzu pachechad chasam b'chayshama shel kainam. They found one flask. Kvar harachti ben Yenzeh says the Hilgach Chassam Sofer. I already was marach in this topic. B'kontreisim shainim in different compendiums. Ve'ershim pai. Let me just write here very quickly. Mashinur lanias daiti devadai tumas meis hotrabatzu. Alt tumas meis. You don't have to worry about that because if the majority of Klal Yisrael is tamei but tumas meis, we could waive that. Achim gazu ala goyim lias kazavim v'tumas zav lo hotrabatzibur. The rabbis, the Chachamim, they were confused what to do. They didn't. The rabbi said, yeah, Goyim are like Zav. But should we go so far as to say Goyim are like Zav? We're going to be Mivatel the Avodah of the Menorah. Oiloi. But Kadosh Baruch Hu Neis, Rebbeinu Shalom made a miracle. V'dalak ches yamim. And they lit 8 days, mibli sheyitztarch levatel alokas haneros, so as not to have to be mevatel the neros. Umizeh heru lahem in hashamayim haskama al gidrei chazal. Hashem gave an endorsement to the Rabbanon, v'nischazei kadas, and the religion was strengthened v'tar sheba'al peh. Wow, that's a new understanding of Chanukah. The miracle of Chanukah was a heavenly endorsement. It was a heavenly endorsement to the Gezeros of the Chachamim. You hear this? The Rabbanan didn't know what to do. The Rabbanan were confused. Should they uphold their words or should they waive it in this situation? Says Rabbi Glatstein, it's so important for me to uphold the Isser Rabbanan. I'm going to change nature just to give a haskama to the Isser Rabbanan. So what's the tachlis of Chanukah? What are we celebrating of Chanukah? The Rebbeinu Shalom support of the Torah Sheba'al Peh. Rabbi say, hold on to your seats. There's a pasuk in Hosea where the Rebbeinu Shalom writes, Echtav loy rubei Torasi, I wrote for you the majority of the Torah, kabay zar nechshavu. You were considered like a stranger. This is number 11. Echtav loy rubei Torasi, kabay zar nechshavu. I wrote the majority of the Torah, and you were considered like a foreigner. We're all familiar with the Gemara in Gittin that Rabbi Yochanan says, like Karas HaKadosh Baruch Hu Brisim Yisrael Ela B'Shvil Dvarim Sheba'al Peh, that the Rebbeinu Shalom only sealed a covenant with the Jewish people through the oral law, Ki Al Pi Hadvarim Ha'ela, because based on these words, Karati Itchabris, I made a covenant with you. Right? If I were to ask you, what shows Rebbeinu Shalom's relationship with the Jewish people more, the written law or the oral law? At first glance, we may say, well, the written law is a more tangible gift. Rebbe Hashem gave it to us with luchos, on stone. It's a more solidified, something we could see with our eyes. You would think then, maybe, that God's covenant with us is through the written law. Says Rabbi Yochanan, no, it's not true. The covenant is with the oral law. Tosfos explains, in the name of the Medrash, that Hashem is saying that when He writes down the written law, we become like strangers. Why do we become like strangers? Because whatever was written down, the Goyim steal. So the Goyim say, you have nothing special with God. The Christians say, we also have the Holy Bible. We have the Holy Bible also. So what are you? You're not special. You have the stone Chumash, and we have the Holy Bible. Whatever was written down, the Goyim co-opted. The Goyim steal from themselves, and they say it's ours. So therefore, Hashem did not write the Torah Sheba'al Peh, so none of the Goyim could steal it. Therefore, it remains like personal between us and God. None of the Goyim could co-opt it.
Yeah, the long time the bishops used to study the Talmud.
But it was, by the way, the Hashgacha had it that the Torah Sheba'al Peh was never written down until the advent of the other religions. Only after those religions were concocted, only then Rebbe Hashgacha had it that the Torah Sheba'al Peh was written. So listen carefully. Listen carefully. They translated. They didn't write the oral law. When we talk about a bris, when we talk about a covenant implies two things. Covenant implies connection between A and B, and a covenant means exclusivity. Only A and B and not C. C is out. How does God use the Torah Sheba'al Peh as the covenant between us and Him? Number one, He gave it to us. And number two, no other nation takes part in it. Because since it wasn't written, only the Jewish people had access to it. None of the other nations had access to it. If you look in the Medrash Tanchuma, look at number 14. This is the Medrash Tanchuma, Parshas Kisisa. Vayomer Hashem al Moshe, Kisav lecha es hadvarim ha'ela, ki al pi hadvarim ha'ela. Zeh she'amar ha'kasav. This is what the pasuk says. Echtav loy rubei Torasi. If I write for you the majority of my Torah, kabay nizar nechshavu, you are considered like strangers. Amar Rabbi Yehuda bar Shalom. Rabbi Yehuda bar Shalom says, Kisha HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'Moshe k'sav l'cha. When Hashem told Moshe to write it, Bikesh Moshe shetei Mishnah b'ksav. Moshe says, once we're writing the Chumash, we should write the Mishnah also, yeah? U'lefi shetzafa HaKadosh Baruch Hu she'umas olam atzilim l'targim z'Torah. But when God saw that the Goyim are going to translate the Torah v'liyos karin ba'Yavanis and read it in Greek, you know why the Greeks wanted to translate the Torah? V'heim oimrim anu Yisrael. Because they wanted to say, we're the Jews.
We're the chosen people.
We're the chosen people. We're your children. And until now, it was up for grabs. Atem oimrim she'atem bonai. You Yevanim, you wanted to translate the Torah and steal the Torah, make us forget the Torah, because you wanted to claim you're Yisrael and you're Banim Tashem. Eino Yodeya Elamisha Mistarin Shali Etzlai Heim Banai. Only the people who know my secrets, they're my children. Only the ones who know Torah Sheba'al Peh, they're my children. Ve'ezahi, what are the secrets of God? Zai HaMishnah Shenitna Apeh. This is the Mishnayis that's written orally, that taught orally. Ba'akol Mimcha L'Drosh. Listen to this. So Hashem says to Moshe, you cannot write down the Mishnah. If you write down the Mishnah, the Yevanim, the same way they translated the Torah, they're going to co-opt the Mishnah, and then they're going to be able to say that, what? They're going to be able to say they are the children of God. So what we learn from this Medrash is that the battle between the Yevanim and the Jews, it's not just the Yevanim wanted us to make us forget the Torah. It was they were claiming, they were struggling over the greatest title that exists in this universe. Who are Banim Atem Hashem Lekech? Who are God's chosen people? Who are God's children? The Yevanim wanted to make us forget the Torah, and as much as possible, take the Torah for themselves, translate it into their language, and if they could have only translated Torah Sheba'al Peh, they chas v'sham maybe would have been more successful in their schemes. But the Rebbe Shalom said, I must allow the oral law to remain oral so that Klal Yisrael never loses the title of Banim. Because bris means us and not them. Now listen carefully to what Rav Hutner says. Rav Hutner writes in his first Maimer on Chanukah that even after the Mishnayos was written, so you ask, but how could the Mishnayos be written? But then we lost our bris. If the whole bris of the oral law is the exclusivity of the oral law, that it's only between us and Hashem, and none of the Goyim take part in it, but so what? Now that there's our scroll Gemara, now the bris is broken. Now that Rabbi Yehuda Anasi wrote down the Torah Sheba'al Peh, now the bris is cut. Now we don't have the covenant with Hashem. Says Rav Hutner, Chas v'Shalom, there is still that secret covenant between us and Rabbi Shalom. Yeah, but it's written. But it's written in a very cryptic way. You ever see Mishnayos? The Mishnayos say, Mishnayos, you read it, say, hey, it doesn't make any sense. This line is a contradiction to this line, and the Gemara says, Chesurei mechsara, the Mishnah is missing words, and this is what it means to say. Now imagine if you handed in your composition in high school, and the teacher said, I don't know what you're writing, what craziness is this? You write a paragraph, and then you left out the man, and then you say, don't worry, Chesura mechsara, v'achiktani. Really, what do you mean, teacher? That's how I learned in the Gemara. It's missing words, and this is what I meant to say. So if nobody would write like that, why did Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, who certainly knew how to write better than anybody else, why did he write that way? Because even when he wrote the oral law, he had to preserve the bris between Klal Yisrael and Ribono Shel Olam. And if every word is written, then the Goyim could steal everything and the bris is broken. So even though he wrote it, he left out things so that private bris between us and God, which is only available through the transmission of the oral law from our Rabbeim to the Talmidim, that remains personalized. That's why in the Mishnah there are all kinds of rules of writing, like Ein Seder Le Mishnah. The Mishnah is written not in a rule, not in order. Imagine, you hand in composition. Teacher says, the whole thing, it doesn't have, first comes the second thing, and you say, no, Ein Seder Le Mishnah. I don't write in order. Well, it's like a rule. Ein Seder Le Mishnah. Well, it's not a good rule. What kind of rule is that? It's a rule that preserves the exclusivity of Torah Sheba'al Peh. There are all kinds of rules in Mishnayos that are keneged the normal seichel, but that, says Rav Hutner, is all to preserve the exclusivity of the covenant of Torah Sheba'al Peh. And therefore, Chanukah, what were the Yevanim trying to steal? We just learned the Yevanim trying to translate the Torah to make the claim the covenant is between them and God. They are the Banim to Hashem. So the Yevanim were out to destroy the oral law. Says Ribono Shel Olam, I'm going to make a miracle of the oil. You don't need a miracle. Just wave the Isur D'Rabbanan. No. The whole purpose of Chanukah is to uphold the Isur D'Rabbanan, uphold the Torah Sheba'al Peh. That's the purpose of Chanukah. And therefore, if that's the purpose of Chanukah, that's the one Yom Tif. That's so exclusive to the Jewish people. It's so just between us and Hashem that we don't write it in the Torah. It has to remain personal between us and Hashem. It has to remain in the gather of Torah Sheba'al Peh in its pristine form. It's not mentioned in the Tanakh. There's no even Masech. It's so personal. It's not even in the Torah Sheba'al Peh. There's no Masechta. It's not mentioned in a unique Mishnah. Says Rav Hutner, this is the Inyan of Chanukah. I remember many years ago, my grandfather, Zol Gesundsein, wrote an article in Das Yiddish Shavart. He wrote it in 1987. And yesterday, as we were preparing the Shiur, I had to run home. I had to get a hold of the article to put it in the Mar Makaimas. Because the name of the article that he wrote, Chanukah, Der Yom Tov von Torah Sheba'al Peh. Right? That sums up exactly what we're saying. That's his name, Zol Gesundsein. That the whole purpose of Chanukah, the Yevanim were trying to steal by translating the Torah. What title were they after? They wanted to be the Banim L'Makom. How? They wanted to have access to the Torah Sheba'al Peh. Hashem told Moshe, don't you dare write down the Torah Sheba'al Peh. The Yevanim are going to steal it. The miracle, therefore, was to uphold the Gzeir D'Rabbanan that Goyim have a din of. So my grandfather brings down many Makairos on Sifrei Chasidus that Chanukah is a Yom Tov of Tarsha B'al Peh. He quotes, he says, Unsere Gedolei HaChasidus Vayra Ba'leichten dem Yom Tov Chanukah als Nitzochen von Tarsha B'al Peh. He quotes the Divrei Chaim for Chanukah. That the whole Eitzah of the Apikarsim, the Yevanim, was to Invato Tarsha B'al Peh. That's from the Divrei Chaim. And the Sfas Emes also in Taf Reish Mem Zayin. He brings down this idea in Taf Reish Mem Dalid, Taf Reish Mem Hey. They're hailing about Ditchever that the second Beis Hamikdash was begather Tarsha B'al Peh. And he brings down a Gavaldik thing from their Wunderlecher Tzaddik, Rav Nachman Mibraslav. What did Rav Nachman Mibraslav say? What's the main mitzvah of Chanukah? L'hoidos, right? To thank Hashem. You know how you thank Hashem? Mizmar nu. Mizmar l'soida. Says Rav Nachman Mibraslav. You know how you thank Hashem? Mizmar l'soida. Hariu l'Hashem kol haaretz. Rashi Tevis halacha. Mizmar l'soida, says Rav Nachman of Mibraslav. Hariu l'Hashem kol haaretz. Rashi Tevis halacha. That's how we thank Hashem. That's how we thank Hashem. Coming back to Rabbi Rucham in the Yarach Mayadim, we have a pasuk in Shiurim. Yishakeini min shikais pihu ki tayvim daidecha miyayin. We say, Bansham, kiss us from the kisses of your mouth, because your love, your friendship is more dear than wine. Says the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, Daf Lamed Hey Amud Aleph. Mai ki tayvim daidecha miyayin. Ki aser avdimi amar amra knesses yisrael fnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ribono shel olam. Arevim olai divrei doidecha yoiser miyeno shel Torah. The words of your friends are more sweet than the wine of Torah. What does that mean? Says Rashi, the divrei soifrim, the words of the Rabbanon, are more dear to the Jewish people than the words of the Torah itself. You hear such a thing? That the Jewish people tell God, God, we love the Torah, we love the Tanakh, but even more dear to us, more beloved to us, more chaviv to us, are the Dinei D'Rabbanan. In fact, if you look in Shiurim Rabbah, look at this. Look at number 20. Chavraya b'shem Rabbi Yochanan, chavivin divrei soifrin mi divrei Torah. The words of the Rabbanon are more chaviv than the words of the Torah. Rabbi say, if the words of the Rabbanon are more chaviv than the words of the Torah, if there was one mitzvah in our observance, therefore, that you would say epitomizes mitzvah d'Rabbanon more than any other mitzvah, and therefore deserves the comment chavivin, you'd have to say it's mitzvah Ner Chanukah. The Yevanim were trying to take away Torah Sheba'al Peh. They wanted to be classified as Banim Lashem. We could have used Tamei oil because it's only Asam Rabban. The Rabban Shem made a miracle to preserve the integrity of the Isser Rabban. Because Rabban Shem wanted to preserve the exclusivity of the bris of Torah Sheba'al Peh. That is possibly why, suggests Rabbi Yerucham Oshin, why the Rambam tells us, mitzvahs Ner Chanukah, mitzvah chaviva hi ad ma'od. What's so chaviv about mitzvah Chanukah? Because mitzvah Chanukah is the epitome of a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. It's to preserve the dinei d'Rabbanan. The Yevanim were trying to go against the Torah Sheba'al Peh, and the Rebbe showed the endorsement to Torah Sheba'al Peh through the miracle. So the mitzvah of Chanukah is the classic mitzvah d'Rabbanan, and therefore the Rambam says of all the mitzvahs that we have, it's the most chaviv. Like Chazal say, chavivin divrei soifrim mi divrei Torah. And I saw in that Sefer Yarach Mayadim that in Zechariah, the Navi Zechariah, by the way, there's a Sefer called Sefer Zechariah, right? It's good to open up. That's the Haftarah from Shabbos Chanukah. It's from the Navi Zechariah, but elsewhere in the Sefer it says, Ki darachti li Yehuda Keshes milesi Ephraim ve'oirarti vanayich tzion al banayich Yavan. I inspired and aroused your children, Sia and Klal Yisrael, over the Banim of Yavan. So here the Navi Zechariah is terming and classifying the clash between Klal Yisrael and the Yavanim is the clash of who are considered Banim Lashem. That's what they're fighting over. And the fight of how one merits being Banim Lashem is who has that exclusive deal and relationship with Hashem, and that exclusive deal is through the Torah Sheba'al Peh.
It's interesting that Machlokes and migrated is now to Muslims. Before it was Christians, now to Muslims. They want to make it.
And Zachariah lived 200 years before the Churban? During the time of Chanukah?
No, Zechariah was before. But this was a Nevuah al Ha'asid. It was a prophecy about the future.
Or in the future.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. So says Rabbi Rucham Olshan, now we understand, Rabbi say, very beautiful thing. On Purim, in the Haidah, in the thanks to Hashem, we don't say that and afterwards they established the Yom Tif of Purim. The establishment of the Yom Tif is not really a chelek, is not really part of the thanks. It's the result of the miracle. But the whole Yom Tif of Chanukah was Ribbon Shalom giving an endorsement to the oral law, giving an endorsement to the Chachamim, upholding the din of the Rabbanon, that Tumas Zav would apply and we're not going to waive it. So, as part of that endorsement and as part of the whole Haskama that the Ribbon Shalom is giving the Chachmei HaTorah, those Chachmei HaTorah then went ahead and utilized that endorsement to establish the Yom Tov of Chanukah. In other words, the establishment of Chanukah is part and parcel the ruach that the Ribbon Shalom gave at that time of upholding the Torah Sheba'al Peh. That was also Din D'Rabbanan. That Din D'Rabbanan of the establishment of Chanukah was also part of the celebration and what we're grateful for. In other words, what are we grateful for on Chanukah? We're grateful on Chanukah for the Ribbon Shalom preserving the exclusivity and the right of the Chachmei HaTorah. Well, if that's what we're grateful on Chanukah, part of what we're grateful for is the establishment of the Yom Tov itself. That was part of the Ribbon Shalom's gift to us. The same way the Ribbon Shalom gifted us with the miracle of the oil to uphold the din of the Rabbanon, the Ribbon Shalom gave us the ability to establish Chanukah in the first place. Let's take a look at that in number 24. Al Pi Kol Dvareinu. Based on what we said, Yeshlach Selavar, we could explain Chasimas Nusach Halanisim, the language of the Alanisim. So after we thank Hashem for the victory, we say why don't we establish this on Purim? Here we could explain very well. This is not just relating the facts, but this is an expression of our recognition of the main facet of the miracle of Chanukah. That after Klal Yisrael prevailed and it became revealed to them the strength of the Rabbanon, the strength of the Torah Sheba'al Peh, and that the Yavanim are not the Banim Lashem, but rather the exclusive covenant was only to us. Now we're elevated. Banecha. Now that Klal Yisrael saw that the exclusive covenant is only to us, we emphasize we're now your Banim. And that's how we were able to establish the Shmoinas Yemei Chanukah. And this is a very important principle in the Yom Tov of Chanukah, the celebration of our exclusive relationship with Hashem. It's so private, it's so exclusive, it's not Nitein Likasev. The Rebbe Shalom doesn't want anyone ever to tamper with it. You can't write in the Tanakh, you can't have a separate Masechta. It's just what we call Dvarim Beinoi Leveina. It's the private relationship that's too personal to be expressed. It's too Lamashal. Between a chassan and a kala, the actual gift, is that really the endearment between chassan and kala? Or it's the personal words that nobody knows about, that are private, that are exclusive between chassan and kala? That's the Torah Sheba'al Peh. The exclusivity of the Torah Sheba'al Peh is really experienced on the Yom Tov of Chanukah, which is not Nitein Li Kasev Rabbi Sa'afrelichin.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.